Hello again, and welcome to the Red Sisterhood. Whatever show. I say that every time. It's like, what do I call it? This podcast is it? Well, just the Red Sisterhood show. As always, you're with Helen and I. I am sitting in kind of like a partial sunbeam. So this is, if you can just hear this, obviously you don't see that. If you're seeing the video, um, I have this partial sunbeam like around half my face. So I'm gonna let Helen introduce us again today.
Oh, I'm just looking at the sun thinking I wish I was like, oh, somewhere sunny. I don't think I can talk about anything other than wanting to be somewhere sunny right now. Um, okay, so today's show, we're going to be exploring judgment, and it's something that affects all of us. And I guess you could take judgment one of two ways. Either it can be of benefit to us. Sometimes we make judgment of situations and that helps us make choice. But what happens when we are critically judgmental, either of self or others, or perhaps fear of judgment from others holds us back? And I think that it's a wide topic that can massively impact our lives without us even consciously being aware of it. I don't know about you, Lisa, but I definitely lived a lot of my years not doing things that felt right to me or that I genuinely felt was my heart's desire out of fear of being judged by others.
100%. 100%. And I think judgment is such a really difficult one and one I've been looking forward to getting into because it's such a double edged sword. So, what we judge quite often is a reflection of what we are judging within ourselves. And also, this is a part of a shadow side of ourselves that nobody really talks about. So, making a snap judgment is not something you have control over. If you look at something or someone and a judgment is made within you and that is followed by a thought, you can't do anything about that. That has just happened.
That's biology, my friend. It's survival.
100%.
It's how we survive in the world. We make snap judgments based on our previous experiences of the world in order to make the best decision to survive.
And sometimes those judgments aren't very nice about a place and a place, a person, a place, a
Oh,
place, about a person or a place or a moment. Our mind might make a really quite hurtful or negative snap judgment, but you have to be okay with that because you haven't got any control of that, just like an emotion. But you have to let it go and don't follow that through. So if I see something and I make the snap judgment, then I've got to catch myself and think, no, that might be something I'm conditioned to think or feel due to past experience. As Helen said, just science. I have a choice now to challenge that and say, I don't think that actually, and I don't feel that. Um, and this is where I have a huge issue with the shaming culture that we're in. And it's everything. So if you share something that says, um, I'm allowed to be big and beautiful and men like women with meat, not just bone, because you're sick of people saying that you should be thinner, that is just as bad as somebody saying someone should be thinner. If you're judging someone for being thin or judging someone for being overweight, it's the same. So if you judge it in a snap judgment, that's fine. You can't do anything about that. Just acknowledge it, challenge it, and let it go. But if you're buying into the conditioning of people should be a certain way because that's what the world has taught them, then you're buying into that judgment. So, in a world full of princesses, be Batman is just as judgy and detrimental to the princesses as us that are unique and shine our weird. It's no further okay to say that than it is to say in a world full of Batman, be a princess. I'll pass you over to Helen because yep.
Yeah, and there's still comparison there. They're still saying one is better than the other, and yet in your experience, you might prefer to be a Batman than a dancer, but that doesn't mean ballerina, whatever you said, dancer. That doesn't mean to say that one is better than the other, and collectively we should believe that one is better than the other. And I think that in terms of why we make judgments, in terms of how our brain works, have you ever met somebody and you've instantly just felt that something's off, or they reminded you of somebody, so you instantly go, oh, I had a bad experience with that person who they remind me of? And there's no coincidence there. It's genuinely how our brain works. Our brain will pick up on certain things and it will tap into what information have I got stored in my brain that is useful in this moment. And if somebody reminds you of somebody you had a bad experience with, your brain will go, here's all these bad memories. You might not even be consciously aware of what it's doing. You just get the feeling. You get that gut instinct. Something doesn't feel right, or that mannerism, oh, that feels familiar. Recognize that in somebody else. If you have a bad experience, we're going to make judgment. But just because somebody's mannerism is the same as something you've got stored in your brain as a bad experience doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to happen again, that it's going to be the same with this person. So I think that, yes, use your discernment, yes, use judgment to your advantage, but equally sometimes challenge that judgment and think about, why am I making that judgment? Yes, accept it. Yes, let it go. But maybe sometimes that judgment is just yourself trying to keep yourself safe. And I think that we do this, we naturally do it. So anybody who goes, I don't judge, like, that's not the truth, because it's biology, it's how we work. I would say that I'm not a very judgmental person. I know that I make judgment because it's how I decide whether to cross the road or not. It's how I decide, oh, you're my people, I like you, that kind of thing. We all make the judgments, but I don't want to be detrimental in terms of my judgments, especially people that I don't know, and especially based on other people's words of mouth. And like, we've kind of cultivated this society where if I have a bad experience, so if Lisa was really mean to me, and then I went and told the world, expecting them to make judgment based on my experience. And I think it's kind of challenging all this judgment that's kind of being passed around. And it's great. It's not great. It's a great example when we look at celebrities and this kind of shameful cancel culture that we've got going on. It's really tragic for the celebrities. I seen something the other day where a guy had made a comment 10 years ago, and he'd come into the limelight now, and he was being held accountable for this detrimental comment he made 10 years ago. And there was this whole cancel culture thing, and I was like, wow, I'm definitely not the same person I was 10 years ago. And maybe in my darkest moments, when I've been in pain 10 years ago, I've made comments that I would be massively ashamed and embarrassed about now. But I recognise that, and I aim to do better and grow and understand more and learn every single day. And the world's very different now. Yet everybody was making judgment on this person from something that happened 10 years ago. And then all of a sudden it's kind of like, let's cancel this person and let's all make judgment on them. Yeah. And that's something I'm not okay with.
And it's really difficult because that example that I just gave, the be a Batman in a World Full of Princesses, or I think the latest one this year was be a witch in a world full of whatevers. And I know for a fact, 5, 6, possibly 7 years ago, I shared that exact meme. But we live and we grow. And you know what? We have all said very damaging, hurtful, and detrimental things from either a place of pain or of ignorance. And especially like our generation, there are lots of things that I didn't realize were racist remarks and racist songs because they were just what people sang when I was younger. And then, thank goodness, I have had people that have challenged me as an adult, and I've gone in absolute horror that I didn't know that. Now, if
I had
someone
this
now,
conversation. I talked over you,
no,
sorry.
that's okay.
I had
But if
this
someone
conversation.
one of those things from a younger me on its own, they're awful. But I was completely ignorant to their meaning. No better. Ignorance is no excuse, but it's horrendous to think the implications and the impact of your words from a place of ignorance. Go on.
No, I was just going to say the exact same thing. I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago on a training course, and somebody said, there was a phrase, and somebody was explaining the origins of it, and I was mortified because I just thought it was an everyday phrase, and it's not something that I say regularly, but I genuinely didn't realise that there was any kind of racial connotations to it, and I was literally gobsmacked. I was like, oh my goodness, like, and I get it because probably 90% of the people that that were around me were probably in the same boat as me, and like you say, ignorant isn't an excuse, but nobody could have challenged me on it because they probably didn't understand it either, and that's it. When things are passed from generation to generation, we're not aware of the origins. It's kind of,
No.
You just know the saying, and you don't, like, I don't know about you, but I never stop and think, oh, I wonder where that came from. I wonder where that came from. Just accept and move on. And you're right, we're getting to this point in society where people are being challenged, and rightly so, because let's understand and be educated.
Let's pass this on for
Yeah.
more people to be ignorant. Let's educate each other. I love being challenged. And there's a real key difference there between judgment and challenge. I'm not judging you for saying something, but I'm going to challenge you on why you are saying that. And then there may be judgment if you are just racist or um whatever. But if it's ignorance, then being challenged is a beautiful thing because I don't want to be in ignorance, especially when that ignorance comes to the detriment of somebody else.
And I think that's it. I think we have to be okay with being challenged. And I think that this kind of position that we're in now in the world, where you can write something on social media and be challenged, like, I'm open for being challenged, and equally I'm open for challenging other people if they, again, are ignorant for what they're doing. But I guess it's not challenging for challenging's sake. It's not challenging because I've made judgment. It's challenging because I want to educate. It's challenging because I want you to understand that actually what you're doing is detrimental. And like you say, if you then continue to do that, maybe then I will pass judgment on you. But actually, if you are doing it because you just genuinely don't have a clue, and it's innocence and ignorance, then let's have the conversations, and let's be okay. Like, it's not comfortable if somebody pulls you up and says, you do realize that X, Y, and Z, and it's not comfortable, but in order to make the world better and for each of us to do better, we have to be okay with that.
100%. And it starts as a child, because as a child, we are taught not to challenge. How dare you challenge me? And as a teacher, I would always say to the children, I'd love you to challenge me, but come at me from a place of education. Come at me with what you've learned. Don't just argue with me. I want you to come and I want you to challenge me and I want you to give me reasons why I'm wrong or why you think that I'm wrong. Because there's a quote somewhere and I can't pull it to mind right now, but it's like, if you educate with a wise man, he'll thank you for it. Or if you challenge a wise man or you argue with a wise man, he will thank you for it. If you argue with a fool, he will drag you down to their level and oh no, he'll hate you for it. I think I've mixed two quotes there. So the first quote was something about a wise man, if you challenge them, will be grateful for it because it makes them wiser, and they will, and a fool will be furious with you because they will take that as an attack. And I don't agree with the wise man and the fool. I hate all of that rubbish. It's just somebody that's open to being wrong and somebody who's still caught in a cycle of being wrong is the end of the world. Um, and it's tough. It is tough. It's not easy to be challenged, and it's not easy to think, wow, they're right. I didn't think about that perspective, and I didn't think about their thoughts, feelings, and opinions. Or I genuinely didn't have a frigging clue about that.
Yeah, and I think that if we are the ones who see things differently, it's important that we challenge from that place of education and not from judgment. And if we're so quick to make a judgment and then hang on to it, what don't we know behind that person? What aren't we seeing? What traumas are they holding? What pain points are they in? And for me, it's being accepting of other people, being accepting of situations, challenge them. But we don't have to make critical judgments and hang on to them. And that doesn't mean to say that we can't judge somebody's behaviour and then think, I'm not allowing that behaviour in my space. There's so many fine lines and grey areas here that if we're making a snap judgment of somebody as a person and labelling that person something, for me, we're not looking at them in a holistic way. We're not looking at them as a whole. We're not seeing that that person has trauma, that person is maybe having a bad day and said something irrational or behaved irrationally.
Or coming from their trigger points.
Yeah, we can definitely make judgment on behaviours.
Yeah.
And we can definitely decide what behaviours we accept in our world and don't accept in our world. I would be more cautious when we come to making judgment of people.
And I just think you have to remember that your judgment is not absolute. My judgment of someone's behavior will be totally different to your judgment of someone's behavior, because it will come from our past experiences and perceptions, as you said, science and biology. And because you judge something as unacceptable doesn't always mean people will change how they behave, rightly or wrongly. And as Helen and I have said before, we teach children's wellbeing courses, and one of the main penny drop moments for our parents is when we say to them, all children lie, and you should be glad of that because it's a developmental milestone. It's part of our developmental makeup to experiment with lies and cause and effect. Yet if we were to judge that child and label them a liar, we could turn them into a liar from that moment on by casting that judgment. But by seeing it as what it is, a developmental milestone, and seeking to understand rather than to judge, seeking to educate rather than to judge, seeking to cooperate rather than to judge, we will totally change how they behave. And that's huge, isn't it?
Massive. And I think it's, again, comes down to how society judge things, and maybe there's this kind of cultural judgment of our in group. So where we're based, we make this judgment, or in our country, we make this judgment. Whatever our kind of in groups is, maybe it's a female thing. In our female gangs, we make this judgment about men or in their gang, and I think it's, again, you can get into that kind of group culture judgment too. And for me, I just think raise your level of self-awareness about judgments that you're making and hanging on to, and just being cautious. Yes, judgment can be great. It's how we get by every day. It's how we decide now's the right time to cross the road. I've made that judgment. I've assessed the risks. It's clear I'm going. But equally, judgment can ruin relationships. Maybe we judge somebody on a bad day. Maybe we judge their behaviour and suddenly label them that as a whole.
And actually, when we're judging, we're coming from our perspective, our perspective and our perception, and where we're at changes on any given day. So making a judgment from a place of pain or overwhelm is totally different to making a judgment from a place of peace and calm. And whenever we come to the end of these, I always get like the next one, and the next one. I don't know if we've done this already. We may have. We need to have like a little list of what we've done. Is for misunderstanding, so much is caused in our lives by misunderstanding, by, speaking to be heard and understood rather than listening to understand. And that's a massive shift.
Fab. So I think that draws us to the end of this episode of this show, or whatever it is that Lisa wants to call it. Do you have any parting words, Lisa?
Be kind to yourself. Absolutely. Helen and I are all about the love and the light and being a light worker and sharing that out in the world. But you've got a shadow side. And your shadow side, that work in the darkness, is where the growth is. That's where you came here to lean into and to grow. So it's really important to shine a light on those parts of yourself and love and accept them, knowing that you will make judgments. There's loads of times in the past where I've gone, I don't judge. And that is ridiculous. I'm eating my own words now, because you do judge. Everybody judges. Can't help it. It's biology, as Helen said. That's my word. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. And that was a great impression of me.
That was an impression of you.
It's biology. Okay, I didn't realise that's how I spoke. Cool. Well, thank you for joining us and having a listen into our natter. If anybody's got any suggestions of topics and conversations that you'd love for us to cover, then reach out and let us know.
Bye bye.